I was standing there in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my tired reflection while taking off the earrings I'd worn my whole life. 69 years of myself looking back, with the same wrinkled hands that had worked tirelessly to give my children everything. The cold water ran from the faucet as I tried to process what had just happened in my own house, in my own living room, where I was supposed to feel safe and respected. 20 people. 20 strangers with suitcases, backpacks, grocery bags, and children running all over the place. Marcus, my only son, had shown up at 3 p.m. with the biggest caravan I had ever seen. No call, no text, not even a knock before letting himself in with his own key, as if my house were some roadside motel they could just check into whenever they felt like it. "Mom, we need to stay here for 1 month," he'd said, with that smile that used to melt my heart when he was a little boy. "These are Tanya's cousins from Port-au-Prince. You know the situation back home. They need a place to stay while they get their papers sorted out." Tanya Dubois, my 35-year-old daughter-in-law, was standing right behind him with her arms crossed, looking like she was waiting for me to say something so she could pounce. Her eyes cut right through me with that stare I'd learned to dread over the last 5 years, ever since she married my son and turned my life into a quiet hell. But this time, something was different. This time, when I saw all those unknowns settling into my furniture, opening my refrigerator, asking where the bathroom was, something inside my chest snapped in a way I'd never felt before. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder, more definitive. "Did you come here to stay for free again?" "No way. Go find a hotel," I yelled with a force I didn't know I had. My voice was clear and firm, without a tremble or an apology. For the first time in years, I wasn't asking permission to speak in my own house. Tanya lunged at me like a wounded animal, her face twisted into something I had never seen before, teeth clenched, fists closed. "It's your obligation to host them. Marcus is your son. This house is his too. You can't be so selfish." Selfish. That word echoed in my ears like a slap. Me, who had worked 16 hours a day at the automobile assembly plant for 40 years to pay for this house. Me, who had raised Marcus alone after his daddy abandoned us when he was 8. Me, who had sold my heirloom jewelry to pay for his college tuition, who had mortgaged my house to help him start his business, who had nursed him when he was sick, and who had never once asked for anything in return. Tanya's cousins stood there awkwardly, watching the spectacle like a cheap daytime drama. Some barely spoke English. Others had that lost look of someone who doesn't fully understand what's happening, but knows they're not welcome. "Marcus," I said to my son, completely ignoring his wife, "talk to me, just you and me." But Tanya wouldn't let me finish. She stepped between us like a human wall with that victim act she'd perfected over the years. "No, we talked to both of us. I'm part of this family too. Marcus, tell your mother she can't treat us this way." My son looked at me with eyes that were no longer the boy I had raised. They were the eyes of a weak man, of someone who had chosen the easy path of letting his wife fight his battles. "Mom, it's only for 1 month. It's not that long. Besides, this house is too big for just you." Too big for just me. As if my solitude were a crime, as if living in the house I'd paid for with my own sweat were a luxury I didn't deserve, as if my 69 years of life didn't entitle me to decide who came into my home and who didn't. 1 month turns into 2, 2 turns into 6, and 6 turns into forever, I told them with a calm that surprised even me. It's happened before, with Tanya's brothers, with her parents, with her aunts. It's always just for a little while, until I become the maid in my own house. It was true, and we all knew it. For the past 5 years, my house had become a family hotel where they showed up, ate my food, used my utilities, dirtied my bathrooms, and left without so much as a thank you. Meanwhile, I washed, cooked, cleaned, and paid the bills that multiplied every time one of the family members needed a favor. "You're a horrible woman!" Tanya screamed at me, with crocodile tears streaming down her cheeks. "Marcus, look how your mother treats me after everything we've done for her. Everything they'd done for me? Like only visiting when they needed money? Only calling to ask me to watch their children while they went on vacation? Making me feel guilty every time I wanted a little peace and quiet in my own home? The silence that followed was deafening. The 20 guests stared at us like we were animals in a zoo. Marcus had his head down like a scolded child. Tanya kept crying with the perfect technique she'd used to manipulate us all for years. But I didn't feel anything anymore. No guilt, no sadness, not even rage. Just a cold, crystal-clear clarity that told me the time had come to make a decision I had been putting off for far too long. "You have 1 hour to leave," I said finally, with the same tranquility I might have used to order a cup of coffee. Everyone, no exceptions. The hour I gave them felt like an eternity. I locked myself in my bedroom, listening to the chaos unfolding in my living room, raised voices, suitcases being dragged, doors slamming. Tanya cried like an actress, shouting things like, "This is inhumane!" and "How can you be so cruel to family?" Marcus tried to calm her with words I couldn't hear clearly, but his tone was one of total defeat. I sat on my bed, the same one where I had spent so many sleepless nights worrying about them, planning how to help them with their financial problems, thinking of ways to be a better mother, a better mother-in-law. I had spent so much time and energy trying to earn Tanya's love that I had forgotten the last time anyone bothered to try and earn mine. When I finally came out, the house was silent. They had left the front door open as a final show of contempt. The living room was a mess. Cushions tossed on the floor, dirty glasses on the coffee table, breadcrumbs everywhere. In the kitchen, I found my refrigerator nearly empty. They had even taken the gallon of milk I had bought that morning. But what hurt the most was finding a crumpled piece of paper on the kitchen table in Marcus's handwriting. "Mom, when you come to your senses and stop being so selfish, call us. But remember that actions have consequences. Don't expect us to come running the next time you need us." Consequences. My own son was threatening me with consequences for defending my home, my peace, my dignity, as if a son's love were something that could be withdrawn when his mother didn't behave like an obedient servant. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not out of regret, but from a strange feeling of freedom I didn't know how to handle. It was like I had been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. But along with that freedom came a painful understanding. My relationship with my son had been built on my ability to be useful, not on genuine love. The following days were revealing in ways I never imagined. Marcus didn't call. Tanya didn't send a single text. It was as if I had died to them, as if 5 years of being their financial and emotional savior had meant nothing. The speed with which they erased me from their lives confirmed something I had been denying. To them, I was a tool, not a person. The real revelation came when I reviewed my bank statements. For years, I had been sending them money without keeping a detailed record. $200 here for groceries, $500 there for rent, $1,000 for an emergency that was never fully specified. In the last year alone, I had transferred nearly $8,000 to Marcus's account. $8,000 that had come from my pension, my savings, and the sale of things that held sentimental value for me. I called the bank that same afternoon. "Mrs. Price, are you sure you want to cancel all the automatic transfers?" the employee asked me, trying to sound neutral but clearly confused. "Those are considerable amounts you've been sending monthly." "Completely sure," I replied, "and I want to change all my passwords. I also want to know if it's possible to remove my son as an authorized beneficiary for account inquiries." That 20-minute conversation freed me from a financial burden I had been carrying without realizing how heavy it was. For years, I had lived with the constant anxiety of not having enough money for my own expenses because I was always calculating how much Marcus might need next month. The next call was even more liberating. "Davis's hardware store. Good morning." The gruff voice of Mr. Davis immediately reassured me. I had known him for 15 years, since I bought the first deadbolts for my house. "Mr. Davis, I need you to come over and change all the locks on my house, all of them, including the garage." "Security problem, Ellie?" "Something like that," I half lied. "Can you come today?" 2 hours later, Mr. Davis was at my door with his toolbox and 3 new high-security locks. As he worked, he told me about other customers who had requested the same service. "It's more common than you think, Ellie. Sometimes family can be more dangerous to your peace of mind than any stranger." I didn't know if he was speaking from personal or professional experience, but his words confirmed that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting. There were people who understood that sometimes love requires physical and concrete boundaries. When he finished, he handed me 4 new keys and put the old ones in a bag. "Do you want to keep them, or should I toss them?" "Toss them," I replied without hesitation. "All of them." Seeing those old keys disappear into his toolbox was like watching years of unauthorized invasions, surprise arrivals, and people entering my house as if it were public territory vanish. For the first time in a long time, my home was truly mine again. That night, eating dinner alone in my clean, quiet kitchen, I realized something extraordinary. I didn't feel lonely. I felt accompanied by myself in a way I had forgotten. The woman who had worked 40 years, who had raised a son alone, who had paid for a house with her own effort, that woman was still here. She had been there all along, waiting patiently for me to remember who I was before I became the useful mother, the convenient mother-in-law, the free babysitter. The phone rang 3 times that night, 3 calls from unknown numbers that I didn't answer. The next day, I found several messages in my voicemail. Tanya's voice, now more calculated and less hysterical. "Eleanor, I know you're there. We just want to talk. Marcus is very sad. He can't believe his own mother rejected him like that." I deleted the messages without listening to them completely. I had learned to recognize emotional manipulation, and those words were full of it. My son was sad about being rejected, but not sad about having disrespected me. Marcus was hurt by the consequences of his actions, but not regretful of the actions themselves. The real trigger arrived a week later, in the quietest and cruelest way possible. It wasn't a shout or a confrontation. It was a white envelope I found slipped under my door, like some supermarket flyer. But when I opened it, my hands started shaking in a way I hadn't felt since the day I found out my husband had abandoned us. It was a photocopy of my last will and testament. My private will, the one I had kept in my safe for years, the one only Marcus knew existed because, like a fool, I had mentioned it to reassure him about his future. Someone had been in my house, opened my safe, and photocopied my most intimate and personal documents. But it wasn't just the violation of my privacy that had me trembling. It was the handwritten note in Tanya's handwriting, taped over the document. "Eleanor, we know exactly how much you're worth. And we know that without Marcus you have no one else. Think carefully before you keep up this nonsense." They had broken into my house like thieves. They had used the keys I had given them years ago when I still believed that family trust was sacred. They had gone through my most private belongings, calculated my worth as if I were a piece of property for sale, and now they were blackmailing me with my own inheritance. The safe was in my bedroom, hidden behind a family photograph taken when Marcus turned 25. A photo where I was genuinely smiling, where my son had his arm around my shoulders with real, not fake, affection. Now, that image seemed like a lie, an act that had lasted longer than any of us had planned. I checked the safe and confirmed my worst suspicions. They had touched everything: my birth certificate, the house deeds, my insurance policies, even the letters my mother had written me before she passed. There were fingerprints on documents that hadn't been moved in years. They had been there for hours, cataloging my life like vultures. But there was something else. A few $100s I kept for emergencies were missing. Not much, maybe $200, but enough to confirm that they hadn't just come for information. They had come to steal. My own son and daughter-in-law had entered my house like common criminals. I sat on my bed with the will in my hands, looking at the numbers that represented a lifetime of work and sacrifice. The house valued at $250,000. the savings that had slowly grown over decades, the insurance policies I had religiously paid every month. Everything totaled almost $400,000, a fortune I had built dime by dime, working double shifts, denying myself vacations, buying secondhand clothes just to save a little more. And they knew it. They knew exactly how much my death was worth to them. Tanya's note wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of intent. They were telling me that my value as a person was directly related to my value as an inheritance. The phone rang just then, as if they had been waiting for me to find their gift. Marcus's voice sounded different, harder, more calculating. "Mom, we need to talk. We know you found our note." "Your note," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is that what you call blackmail and theft now?" "Don't be dramatic, Mom. We just want what's best for you. A woman your age shouldn't live alone with so much money in the house. It's dangerous. We can help you manage your resources better." Manage my resources. As if my 69 years of life hadn't taught me anything about handling money. As if the woman who had built an estate from scratch needed two people who lived by begging to teach her about finances. "Marcus," I told him with a calm that stunned me, "you entered my house without permission, opened my safe, stole money and private documents, and now you're threatening me with blackmail. That's not help. That's a crime. Don't talk nonsense. We're your family. We have a right to know how you're handling things. Besides, sooner or later, all of that is going to be mine. We're just trying to plan better." Sooner or later, all of that is going to be mine. Those words felt like daggers stabbing my chest. My son wasn't worried about my well-being. He was worried about his inheritance. He didn't care if I lived with dignity. He cared that I died leaving everything intact. "You know what, Marcus?" I said, feeling something inside me harden for good. "You're right about one thing. It's time to plan better." I hung up before he could respond. My hands weren't trembling anymore. My mind was crystal clear. For years, I had been living in fear of losing my son's love, but now I realized that love had died a long time ago, probably when Tanya came into his life and taught him to see me as a resource rather than a person. I searched my address book for a number I hadn't dialed in months. Attorney David Chen, the lawyer who had drafted my original will, a serious professional man who had helped me with the house papers and other legal matters over the years. "Attorney Chen, this is Eleanor Price. I need to make some significant changes to my legal documents. Can you see me tomorrow?" "Of course, Mrs. Price. Is it urgent?" "Let's just say it's necessary," I replied, looking at the family photo that now seemed like evidence of a well-constructed lie. "Very necessary." That night I slept better than I had in weeks, not because I was happy, but because I finally had a plan. For years, I had been reacting to Marcus and Tanya's manipulations, trying to be the perfect mother, the understanding mother-in-law, the available grandmother. But no more. Now it was my turn to act, and they had made the mistake of showing me exactly what kind of people they really were. They had dropped the mask too soon. They had revealed their true intentions before fully securing what they wanted. They had completely underestimated me. They thought a 69-year-old woman would be easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to blackmail. They didn't know that the same strength that had allowed me to work 40 years in a plant, raise a son alone, and build an estate from nothing, that same strength was now directed against them. The war had begun, but this time, I had the advantage of knowing exactly who I was fighting. Attorney David Chen's office was on the second floor of an old but elegant building downtown. I had been there many times before, always nervous, always wondering if I was making the right decisions. But this time, I climbed those stairs with a determination that surprised myself. Every step resonated with the certainty of a woman who had finally understood the game they were playing with her. "Mrs. Price," David greeted me with that professional smile I had learned to appreciate over the years. "You look different, more resolved." "Because I am, attorney. Completely resolved." I told him everything, omitting no details, softening no reality. Without that tendency I had developed to protect my son's image, even when he didn't deserve it. I explained the invasion of my home, the theft of documents, the veiled blackmail, the years of financial and emotional abuse I had been normalizing as family love. David listened in silence, taking occasional notes, but mostly observing me with that expression lawyers get when they're evaluating the seriousness of a situation. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked me straight in the eye. "Mrs. Price, what you are describing constitutes several felonies: unlawful entry, theft, blackmail, and elder financial abuse. Are you willing to proceed legally against your son?" The question hung in the air between us like an unexploded bomb. My entire life, I had been unable to imagine a situation where Marcus and I were on opposite sides. But now, sitting in that office, I realized he had crossed that line long before I did. He had chosen to treat me like an enemy from the moment he decided my love was an exploitable resource instead of an invaluable gift. "I don't want to hurt him unnecessarily," I replied slowly, "but I am also not going to continue being a victim of his abuse. I want to legally protect myself in a way that makes him understand that his actions have real consequences." David nodded and began explaining my options. We could start with a restraining order that would prohibit them from approaching my property. We could completely change my will, adding clauses that protected my wishes from posthumous manipulation. We could establish a trust that controlled any future inheritance, so it couldn't be mismanaged. "But there's something more important than all of that," he said, leaning forward. "You need to protect your assets now while you're alive. If they are willing to blackmail you, they are also willing to find ways to access your money while you're still here." He was right. For years, I had been so worried about what would happen to my money after I died that I had neglected to protect it during my life. Marcus had access to information about my accounts, knew my financial routines, and knew when and where I made important transactions. "I want to transfer everything to new accounts," I said. "No, different accounts, with passwords only I know, and I want you to be my only authorized contact for emergencies." Over the next 2 hours, David and I planned a complete restructuring of my financial and legal life. New bank accounts at an institution where Marcus had no contacts, a completely new will that included specific clauses about manipulation and abuse, and a restricted power of attorney that allowed me to maintain total control over my decisions while establishing protections in case someone tried to declare me incompetent. "There's one more thing," I said as we were finishing. "I want to officially document everything that has happened. The invasions, the thefts, the threats, in case things get worse." David looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Mrs. Price, are you sure you want to go this far? Once we set this in motion, it will be very difficult to go back." "Attorney," I replied, feeling a strength in my voice I hadn't heard in years, "I can't go back. They made sure of that when they decided to treat me like an easy target instead of the mother and grandmother who deserved respect." I left that office with a folder full of documents to sign and a list of tasks to complete over the next few days. But more importantly, I left with a sense of control I hadn't felt since before Tanya entered our lives. For the first time in years, I was directing my own story instead of simply being a secondary character in someone else's. The bank was my next stop. "I want to close all my current accounts and open new ones at this bank," I told the manager, a professional woman in her 40s who listened without asking unnecessary questions. "Is this for security, Mrs. Price?" "Exactly, for security." The process took 3 hours, but when I left, my life savings were protected behind new passwords, new account numbers, and new security protocols that Marcus and Tanya could never penetrate. I had moved $300,000 from a lifetime of work to a place where only I had access. That afternoon, while organizing my new bank documents in my house, now protected by new locks, I received the first panic call. It was Marcus, but his voice sounded different, desperate. "Mom, what did you do? We went to the bank and they told us you don't have accounts there anymore. You moved all the money." "Where?" "Marcus," I replied with a calm that filled me with pride. "What I do with my money is none of your business. It never should have been your business. But Mom, we help you with your finances. We need to know where everything is in case something happens to you. The only thing you need to know is that my affairs are in order and that you will no longer be able to manipulate me using my own money as leverage. The silence on the other end of the line was long and revealing. Marcus was calculating, trying to find a new angle of attack. When he spoke again, his voice had that manipulative tone I had learned to recognize. Mom, Tanya is very worried about you. She says you've been acting strangely. Maybe you need medical help. We could take you to the doctor to make sure you're okay. There it was, the veiled threat of declaring me incompetent, of questioning my mental health, because I no longer behaved like the obedient victim they needed. But I was prepared for that, too. Marcus, yesterday I had a complete medical exam with Dr. Jackson. It included cognitive and psychological evaluations. Everything is documented and filed with my attorney. I am perfectly lucid and competent to make my own decisions. It was a strategic lie. I hadn't been to the doctor, but now I knew I needed to go. David had warned me that medical incompetence would be their next move, and I had to stay one step ahead. I don't understand why you're doing this, Marcus said, and for the first time in a long time, he sounded genuinely confused rather than manipulative. I'm doing this because I finally understood that you never loved me for who I am, only for what I can give you, and I'm not going to live begging for love from people who only see me as a resource. I hung up before he could reply, and for the first time in months, I genuinely smiled. I didn't have to wait long to see their next moves. It was as if I had activated a silent alarm that had put the entire family into crisis mode. Over the next 3 days, my phone rang constantly. Unknown numbers, blocked numbers, and occasionally Marcus's number, which I no longer answered. But it wasn't just them. They had recruited reinforcements. The first to arrive was Shayla, Tanya's younger sister, a 30-year-old woman who had always been sweet to me, but who now knocked on my door with the urgency of someone on a mission. Through the window, I saw her standing there with flowers in her hands and that nervous smile people wear when they're about to lie. "Aunt Ellie," she called out from outside, using that affectionate title that had never sounded so false. "It's Shayla. I just want to talk to you. I'm worried." I didn't open the door, but I spoke to her through the window. "Shayla, who sent you here?" Her smile wavered a bit. "No one sent me, Auntie. Tanya told me what happened, and I thought maybe there was a misunderstanding. You know my sister loves you very much." "Your sister loves me so much that she broke into my house to steal my private documents and then blackmailed me with my own inheritance." Shayla lowered the flowers, and her expression completely changed. She was no longer the sweet, worried niece. She was now an emissary with a specific message. "Auntie, my sister says you're confused, that maybe your age is affecting you more than you think. She says she would never do anything like that." There was the second phase of their strategy. First, they tried direct blackmail. When that failed, they came with the gaslighting, trying to make me believe that I had imagined everything, that my memory was failing, that my perception of reality was distorted by age. "Shayla," I said with a patience I didn't feel, "I'm 69 years old, not 99. My mind is perfectly clear, and I have physical evidence of everything that happened, including your sister's handwritten note." "But Auntie, don't you think maybe you misinterpreted the situation? Tanya says you two had an argument and that things were said in the heat of the moment. Maybe it wasn't as serious as you remember." It was incredible how they tried to minimize what had happened. An invasion became an argument. Theft became a misunderstanding. Blackmail became things said in the heat of the moment, as if the right words could change the reality of what they had done. "Shayla, tell your sister that if she wants to talk to me, she can do so through my attorney. I will no longer have direct conversations with any of you." I watched her walk away with the flowers in her hands, likely to report that the reconnaissance mission had failed, but I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. They had too much to lose to retreat after the first attempt. The second emissary arrived the next day. This time it was Robert, Marcus's older brother, my brother-in-law, who lived in another city and whom I only saw once a year at Christmas. A serious, hard-working man who had always respected me, which is why his appearance hurt more than Shayla's. "Ellie," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk. Marcus called me and he's very worried." Unlike with Shayla, I decided to let Robert in. I had known this man for more than 30 years. He had been at my husband's funeral. He had helped when Marcus was a struggling teenager. If there was anyone in the family who might understand my position, it would be him. "Robert, what exactly did he tell you?" Marcus sat in my living room, looking around with that expression people get when they notice changes but can't quite identify what's different. My house felt different, because I felt different. There was a calm and order that hadn't been there in years. "He told me you had a really bad fight, that you kicked him and Tanya's entire family out of the house, that you won't answer his phone calls, and that you moved all your money to accounts he doesn't know about. Is that all he told you?" Robert looked at me with curiosity. "There's more?" I told him the whole story, every detail, every violation, every manipulation. I watched as his expression gradually changed from confusion to concern, and finally to something that looked like indignation. When I finished, he remained silent for a long time. "Ellie," he finally said, "I didn't know any of this. Marcus presented the situation to me as if you were the one being unreasonable. And what do you think now?" "I think my nephew has become someone I don't recognize. The Marcus I knew would never do something like this to his mother." It was a relief to hear those words from someone who had known my son since he was a child. For a moment, I had started to doubt my own perception, wondering if I was really exaggerating the situation as everyone tried to convince me. "Robert, can I ask you something? Did Marcus ask you for money to come here?" His expression gave me the answer before he spoke. "He asked me to loan him $300 for gas and travel expenses. He said it was urgent, that he had to come help you because you were in a crisis." $300. My son had defrauded his own uncle to finance a mission of manipulation against me. He had used Robert's genuine concern as a tool to get money, exactly as he had been using my love for years. "Ellie, I didn't know things had gone this far," Robert said, and I could see the genuine disappointment in his eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I'm already doing it, Robert. I'm protecting my dignity, my peace of mind, and my estate, and I won't apologize for it." He left an hour later, but before leaving, he gave me something I hadn't received from anyone else in my family for months. Respect. "Ellie, I think you're doing the right thing, and if you need anything real, don't hesitate to call me." But the real attack came that night. It wasn't Shayla with flowers or Robert with genuine concern. It was Tanya with the heavy artillery. She arrived with two women I didn't recognize, knocking on my door with an aggression that made the whole house vibrate. "Eleanor, open this door immediately. We need to talk." Through the window, I could see that one of the women had a phone camera pointed toward my house. They were recording. Tanya had come prepared to create a spectacle, probably to have evidence that I was the unreasonable person in this situation. "We know you're in there," one of the strangers yelled. "It's a disgrace how you treat your family. Marcus told us everything." I didn't open the door, but I did call the police. "Officer, I have 3 people on my private property who refuse to leave and are recording videos without my consent." They arrived in 15 minutes. By then, Tanya and her friends were sitting on my lawn as if they were protesters. When they saw the patrol lights, they immediately changed their attitude from aggressive to victimized. "Officer," I heard Tanya tell the police officer, "we're worried about this woman. She's my sister's mother-in-law, and we believe she's having mental health problems. She won't answer her phone. She won't let us visit." But I had already learned how to play this game. I stepped out of my house with a copy of the restraining order that David had prepared, anticipating exactly this situation. "Officer," I said with the calmest voice I could muster, "these people have repeatedly trespassed on my private property, stolen documents from my house, and threatened me. I have documented evidence of everything." The police officer checked my papers and then spoke to Tanya and her friends. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I saw their expressions change from indignation to nervousness. "Ladies," the officer finally told them, "you need to leave this property immediately, and you cannot return without a court order." I watched them walk away, but I could hear Tanya shouting from the street. "This isn't over, Eleanor. Marcus has rights. You're going to regret starting this war." War. She had finally used the correct word, because that's exactly what this had become. The war Tanya had officially declared brought with it a loneliness I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the loneliness of being physically alone, which I had already learned to manage and even enjoy. It was the loneliness of realizing that all the relationships I had built over the years were contaminated by the poison Marcus and Tanya had been systematically spreading. Calls from family friends came one after another in the following days, but none were to ask how I really was. All were to convey the concern Marcus had planted in every conversation, to suggest that maybe I was being too harsh, to insinuate that my age was making me difficult to deal with. Dolores, the friend I had met at the plant 20 years ago, was the most direct. "Ellie, Marcus called me crying. He says he doesn't know what to do with you, that you're not the same person you used to be." "And what did you tell him, Dolores?" "I told him I'd talk to you, that maybe you needed someone to talk some sense into you." Talk some sense into me. As if defending my dignity were some madness that required correction, as if the years of abuse I had tolerated were sense, and my decision to end it was irrationality. "Dolores, did Marcus ever tell you why this all started? Did he tell you he broke into my house without permission, went through my private documents, and stole money from me?" The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Of course, Marcus hadn't mentioned those details. His version of the story painted me as a cruel mother who had gone crazy out of nowhere and kicked out her poor son without reason. "Dolores," I told her with a sadness that surprised me, "if after 20 years of friendship, you prefer to believe the version of someone you don't even know well instead of asking me what really happened, then we were never really friends." I hung up, knowing I had just lost another relationship, but also knowing it had been a relationship built on false pretenses. A true friend would have come to my house to hear my side before passing judgment. But in the middle of the isolation campaign Marcus had orchestrated, a voice appeared that I didn't expect. It was Brenda, my neighbor 3 houses north, a 55-year-old woman who worked as a nurse at the county hospital. We had exchanged polite greetings for years, but we had never had deep conversations. She arrived at my door one Saturday morning with a cup of coffee in each hand and an expression I couldn't decipher. "Eleanor, can I sit with you for a while? I've noticed a lot of strange movement around your house lately." I let her in, grateful for a conversation that didn't seem to come with a hidden agenda. Brenda had that direct way of speaking that only people who have witnessed too much human suffering in their work develop. "Eleanor, I've been watching. I've seen the patrol cars. I've seen that woman shouting in your yard. I've seen different people knocking on your door at odd hours. And I've also noticed that your son and his wife haven't been around for weeks, when before they came almost every day." She leaned back on my sofa and looked me straight in the eye. "In my job, I see a lot of family abuse, especially against the elderly, and I recognize the patterns. Do you want to tell me what's really going on?" For the first time in weeks, someone was asking for my side of the story without a predetermined agenda. I told Brenda everything, omitting no details, softening no reality. She listened as only someone trained to recognize trauma and manipulation knows how to listen. "Eleanor," she said when I finished, "what you're describing is a classic pattern of financial and emotional abuse. At the hospital, we see similar cases every week. Adult children who treat their parents like ATMs, who use guilt and manipulation to maintain control. Hearing those words from someone professionally trained to recognize abuse was like receiving a validation I didn't know I desperately needed. For weeks, I had been questioning whether I was truly exaggerating, whether my reactions were disproportionate, whether I had misinterpreted situations because of my advanced age. "You know what worries me most about your story?" Brenda continued. "It's not the theft of the money or even the invasion of your house. It's the smear campaign they're running against you. They are systematically trying to convince everyone that you are losing your mental capacity. That is a very dangerous tactic." She was right. I hadn't thought of it as a coordinated strategy. But now I could see the pattern clearly. Everyone who had contacted me had been given the same story. "Eleanor is acting strangely. She's being unreasonable. Maybe her age is catching up to her." "Brenda, what can I do to protect myself from that?" "The first thing is to document everything. Every conversation, every incident, every threat. The second is to get professional medical and psychological evaluations that demonstrate your mental competence. And the third is to build a support network with people who are not influenced by your family." She gave me the name of a psychologist specializing in family abuse cases and the number of a local organization that helped seniors in situations of exploitation. "Eleanor, you are not alone in this. There are support systems for women in your situation." In the following days, I followed Brenda's advice to the letter. Dr. Kim, the psychologist she recommended, gave me a complete evaluation that confirmed what I already knew. I was perfectly lucid, emotionally stable, and capable of making my own decisions. He gave me an official report that I added to my legal file, along with all the other documents David had helped me prepare. The support organization for seniors connected me with other women who had gone through similar situations. Listening to their stories was both revealing and painful. A 72-year-old woman told me how her daughter had emptied her bank accounts using power of attorney. Another explained how her grandchildren had convinced her to sell her house for her own safety and then put her in a nursing home while they lived off the sale money. "The thing you have to understand, Eleanor," one of them told me, "is that to our abusive children, we are not people. We are resources. And when a resource stops being useful or becomes problematic, they discard it or try to forcibly control it." Those words hit me like a hammer. All my life, I had been trying to understand why my unconditional love wasn't enough for Marcus, why my sacrifices didn't generate gratitude, but instead led to more demands. Now I understood that I had been applying emotional logic to a relationship that, to him, was purely transactional. But the real turning point came when Brenda brought me information I hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. "Eleanor, I work at the county hospital. I have access to public records. Your daughter-in-law, Tanya, has been asking about legal guardianship procedures. She consulted with 2 different attorneys about how to declare someone incompetent." My blood ran cold. Legal conservatorship meant they could completely strip me of control over my finances, my medical decisions, even where I lived. If they managed to convince a judge that I was mentally incapacitated, they could take total control of my life and my estate. "How much time do I have before they can start those proceedings?" "They already started, Eleanor. They filed a preliminary petition 3 days ago. You have a hearing scheduled for next week." My world spun. While I had been playing defense, protecting my assets and setting boundaries, they had been playing offense, trying to completely take away my legal capacity to defend myself. But this time, I didn't freeze. This time, I knew exactly what to do. I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. "Attorney, we have a legal emergency, and this time we're going on the counterattack." The county courthouse had never seemed so intimidating as it did that Thursday morning. David had worked day and night for a week preparing our defense, and I had spent those same nights organizing every document, every piece of evidence that demonstrated not only my mental competence, but also the systematic pattern of abuse I had suffered for years. "Mrs. Price," David told me as we waited in the hallway, Remember that the judge will evaluate not only your mental capacity, but also the motivations of those requesting the conservatorship. We have built a solid case. Through the glass of the door, I could see Marcus sitting next to a lawyer I didn't recognize, an older, well-dressed man with that look of certainty that only professionals who are used to winning possess. Tanya was standing behind them, dressed in black as if she were at a funeral, my legal funeral. What hurt most was seeing that they had brought witnesses. Dolores was there, the same woman who had been my friend for 20 years and who was now going to testify against my mental competence based on the lies Marcus had told her. Paul, a distant cousin I barely saw at family gatherings, was also there, having apparently developed a sudden, deep concern for my well-being. Case number 2024-A789, Marcus Price versus Eleanor Price. Petition for involuntary conservatorship due to mental incapacity, announced the court clerk. The judge, a man in his 60s with gray hair and an expression that had seen too many unpleasant family cases, reviewed the initial documents before addressing us. This court will evaluate Mr. Marcus Price's petition to declare his mother, Mrs. Eleanor Price, mentally incompetent, for the purpose of assuming legal control over her finances and medical decisions. We will proceed with the petitioner's testimonies. Marcus's attorney stood up with a smile that nauseated me. Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Mrs. Eleanor Price has developed a pattern of erratic behavior, unjustified paranoia, and irrational decision-making that puts her well-being and financial security at risk. He called Marcus as the first witness. My son approached the stand with an expression of sadness that would have convinced anyone who didn't know the truth. His performance was masterful. Your Honor, my mother was always a warm, generous woman, but in recent months she has changed completely. She has become distrustful, aggressive, and paranoid. She believes her entire family is conspiring against her. Can you give specific examples of this erratic behavior? The attorney asked. Yes, Your Honor. A few weeks ago, my wife and I came to visit her with some relatives who needed a temporary place to stay. It's something we'd done before without any issues. But this time, my mother screamed at us, accused us of trying to steal from her, and violently kicked us out of the house. Marcus's version was technically true, but completely distorted. Yes, there had been screaming. Yes, I had kicked them out of the house, but he had conveniently omitted the context. 20 people showing up without warning to stay for a month, the previous invasion of my home, the theft of documents, and years of financial abuse. Furthermore, Your Honor, Marcus continued, my mother has moved all her money to secret accounts, changed the locks on her house, cut off communication with all family members, and has started making false accusations about supposed thefts and blackmail that never occurred. Have you noticed other signs of mental deterioration? The attorney asked. Yes, Your Honor. My mother claims we have documents we don't have, that we've been in her house when we haven't been, that we've done things that only exist in her imagination. We believe she is developing some form of dementia that is causing her to create false realities. It was a brilliant and wicked strategy at the same time. They were taking every rational action I had taken to protect myself and presenting it as evidence of dementia. My decision to safeguard my finances became paranoid behavior. My evidence of their abuses became false realities. My setting of boundaries became irrational aggression. They called Dolores next. My former friend testified with tears in her eyes about how I had completely changed, how I had lost the ability to maintain normal relationships, and how I had screamed at her without reason during our last phone conversation. Paul was equally destructive, describing how I had been acting strangely on the few occasions we had seen each other, how I had talked about family conspiracies that he couldn't understand. When David stood up for our turn, I felt as if I had been stabbed by every person who had testified, but my attorney had a smile I hadn't seen before. Your Honor, the defense will demonstrate that Mrs. Eleanor Price is not only completely lucid and competent, but that she has been the victim of a systematic pattern of family abuse that completely justifies every action she has taken to protect herself. He began by presenting the medical and psychological evaluations I had completed the week before, official reports from 3 different professionals: Dr. Jackson, internist, Dr. Kim, clinical psychologist, and Dr. Rodriguez, neurologist, all confirming my total mental competence, emotional stability, and capacity to make rational decisions. Your Honor, these professionals all agree that Mrs. Price has cognitive capabilities normal for her age, with no signs of dementia, mental deterioration, or inability to make decisions. Next, he presented the physical evidence of the abuse: Tanya's handwritten note with the blackmail regarding my will, the photocopies of my private documents that had been taken without my permission, and the bank records showing the constant transfers of money I had been sending them for years. Your Honor, what the petitioners call paranoia and erratic behavior is actually a rational and necessary response to years of financial and emotional exploitation. He called Brenda as a witness. My neighbor testified about what she had observed from her professional perspective as a nurse with experience in family abuse cases. Your Honor, I have evaluated Mrs. Price both as a medical professional and a concerned neighbor. Her behavior is consistent with that of an abuse victim who has finally found the strength to establish healthy boundaries. There is nothing in her behavior to suggest mental incapacity. But the most powerful moment came when David called me to testify. I walked to the stand with trembling legs but a clear mind. For 40 minutes, I told my complete story. No tears, no dramatics, just clear, chronological facts. I explained how I had worked 40 years to build my estate, how I had raised Marcus alone after his father abandoned us, how I had started sending them money regularly when he married, how those loans were never repaid and became expectations, and how the invasion of my home and the blackmail had been the final straw. Your Honor, I concluded, I did not change overnight. What changed was my willingness to tolerate abuse. After 69 years of life, I finally learned that self-love is not selfishness, and protecting my dignity is not a mental illness. Marcus's attorney tried to attack my testimony with questions about my social isolation and my extreme financial decisions, but I was prepared for everyone. Counselor, I replied when he asked why I had cut off contact with my family. If you had neighbors who broke into your house without permission, stole your private documents, and then blackmailed you with your own inheritance, would you keep the doors open for them? The judge took an hour recess to review all the evidence. When he returned, his expression was serious but determined. After reviewing all the evidence presented, including the professional medical evaluations, financial records, and testimonies from all parties, this court finds that Mrs. Eleanor Price is completely lucid and competent to handle her own affairs. I felt as if I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court finds concerning evidence of a pattern of financial and emotional abuse against Mrs. Price. The petition for conservatorship is denied in its entirety. Marcus and Tanya looked as if they had been slapped. Their lawyer tried to maintain a professional composure, but I could see the defeat in his eyes. Mr. Marcus Price, the judge said, addressing my son directly, I strongly suggest you reconsider your relationship with your mother. The courts do not take lightly attempts to use the legal system to perpetuate patterns of family abuse. We left the courthouse victorious, but I didn't feel triumph. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had won my legal freedom, but I had definitively lost my son in the process. Mrs. Price, David told me as we walked down the courthouse steps, now that we have officially established your legal competence, we can proceed with the other aspects of your protection. What other aspects? The criminal complaints for trespassing, theft, and blackmail. We now have official evidence that you are a competent victim, not a confused person. That completely changes the legal landscape. I looked back and saw Marcus and Tanya leaving the courthouse. He looked me straight in the eyes for the first time in weeks, and what I saw there wasn't love, wasn't repentance, wasn't even anger. It was pure hatred. The war was far from over. The victory in court should have brought me peace, but instead it unleashed something I hadn't anticipated. The desperation of two people who had just watched a $400,000 inheritance slip through their fingers. The hatred I saw in Marcus's eyes that day materialized into actions over the following weeks in ways that confirmed I had made the right decision, but also showed me how far my son had fallen. The first sign came 3 days after the trial. Brenda knocked on my door at 7 in the morning with an urgent expression that immediately put me on alert. "Eleanor, last night I saw a man lurking around your house. He was checking the windows, looking at the locks. When I got close to ask what he was doing, he ran off." "Did you recognize him?" "It wasn't Marcus or anyone I've seen before. But Eleanor, I think someone is planning to break into your house." That same afternoon, returning from the grocery store, I found my mailbox had been forced open. Nothing was taken, but it was clear they had been going through my correspondence, looking for information about my new bank accounts, my insurance, anything that would give them clues on how to access my money. I called David immediately. "Attorney, I think they are escalating. If they can't take my money legally, they're going to try to do it illegally." "Mrs. Price, it's time to involve the authorities more seriously. We are going to file formal complaints for harassment, invasion of privacy, and implicit threats." But before we could proceed with the complaints, Marcus made his most desperate and cruel move. He showed up at my door on Friday night, alone, without Tanya, with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a child and had broken something valuable. "Mom," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk, just you and me, as mother and son." There was something in his voice that made me hesitate. For a moment, I saw the 8-year-old boy I had comforted when his father left us, the teenager I had helped with his homework, the young man I had hugged when he graduated from college. "Marcus, are you coming in peace?" "I've come to apologize, Mom. Tanya has been pressuring me, manipulating me. I know things got out of hand." I decided to let him in, but I kept the door open. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus gave me the most convincing performance I had seen in years. He cried, he apologized, he admitted he had made mistakes. He promised things would be different. "Mom, I know I lost your trust, but I'm your only child. We're all we have in this world. We can't end things like this." For a moment, my mother's heart softened. For a moment, I wanted to believe that my son had found sanity, that love had overcome greed, that we could rebuild something real from the wreckage of our relationship. But then he made the mistake that revealed his true intentions. "Mom, to show you that I really want to fix things, I think we should start by putting everything in order legally. We could establish a family trust where I help you manage your finances, not to take control, but just to make sure you always have everything you need." There it was. After all the theater, after all the tears and apologies, he was still trying to gain access to my money. He had just switched his strategy from direct aggression to emotional manipulation. "Marcus," I told him with a calm that astonished me, "do you really think I'm foolish enough to fall for that?" His expression changed instantly. The mask of remorse fell, and the real Marcus emerged again. "Mom, I'm trying to help you. At your age, handling so much money is complicated. You could make mistakes." "Mistakes like trusting you." "Be reasonable, Mom. I'm your son. That money is going to be mine anyway when you die. Why can't we just make this easy for everyone?" There was the raw, undisguised truth. To Marcus, I was just a temporary obstacle between him and his inheritance. My life, my well-being, my dignity, none of it mattered compared to his impatience to access my money. "Marcus," I said, standing up from my chair, "get out of my house now." "What? Are you going to call the police again? Are you going to keep making a fool of yourself?" "No, Marcus, I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to call my attorney, and we are going to change my will completely." His face turned pale. "Mom, you can't do that. I'm your only son. And you just proved to me that is the biggest tragedy of my life." He left shouting threats that I couldn't fully hear, but they included words like, "You'll regret this," and "This won't be the end." The next day, David and I drafted a completely new will. Instead of leaving everything to Marcus, we established a trust that would donate the majority of my estate to charitable organizations working with victims of family abuse. Marcus would receive $20,000, enough so he couldn't legally contest the will for total omission, but not enough to be worth continuing his campaign of harassment. "Mrs. Price," David told me as we signed the documents, "are you sure about this decision? It's quite radical." "Attorney," I replied, "my son taught me that money can corrupt even a mother's love. I will not allow my legacy to be the source of more corruption." That decision liberated me in a way I hadn't anticipated. For years, I had been carrying the weight of preserving an inheritance for someone who didn't deserve it. Now, my money would serve to help other women in situations similar to mine. But Marcus didn't give up easily. Over the following weeks, he tried everything: emotional manipulation, legal threats, constant harassment. He even hired a private investigator to follow me, trying to find evidence of erratic behavior he could use in a new conservatorship trial. The final breaking point came when Brenda showed me photos she had discreetly taken. Marcus and Tanya had been measuring my house from the outside, taking pictures of the windows, doing what looked like reconnaissance for a planned burglary. "Eleanor," Brenda told me, "I think they're planning something serious. This is no longer just harassment. This is criminal planning." She was right. It was time to end this once and for all. The final confrontation arrived in the most cowardly form possible. It wasn't the dramatic showdown I had imagined, but something far more sinister. An attempted burglary that confirmed my son had crossed every line separating family manipulation from common crime. It was a Tuesday night when I heard noises in my backyard. They weren't the normal sounds of cats or the wind. They were calculated footsteps, the scraping of tools against metal, urgent whispers. Someone was trying to force open my kitchen window. From my bedroom, with the lights off, I could see the shadows of two figures working on the window. One was clearly Marcus, based on his height and posture. The other was smaller, likely Tanya. After years of emotional manipulation, they had decided to resort to direct theft. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, definitive clarity. I picked up my phone and dialed 911 while recording a video of what was happening. "911, what is your emergency?" "I have 2 intruders trying to enter my house through the back window. I'm recording everything. I don't know if they are armed, but one of them is my son. This is part of a pattern of harassment that we have been legally documenting." The police arrived in 8 minutes. By then, Marcus and Tanya had managed to open the window and were inside my kitchen with flashlights, searching drawers and cabinets. The officers arrested them red-handed with burglary tools and video evidence of their illegal entry. When Marcus saw me standing in the living room with the police, his expression wasn't one of remorse or shame. It was pure rage. "This is ridiculous. She's my mother. You can't arrest me for being in my family's house." "Sir," the older officer told him, "this is Mrs. Price's private property. You have no legal right to be here without her permission, and you certainly don't have the right to break in. She's sick. She needs us. We were just trying to help her." Tanya tried a different approach, crying and claiming they were worried about my safety and had come to check on me. But the burglary tools in their hands and the video I had recorded told a very different story. They were arrested for trespassing, attempted burglary, and harassment. As they were being handcuffed, Marcus shouted at me from the patrol car, "This doesn't end here, Mom. You're going to need us someday, and we won't be there." "Marcus," I replied, in a voice I barely recognized as my own, "I no longer need anyone who sees me as an obstacle to their greed." Those were the last words we exchanged. The following months brought a peace I hadn't felt in years. Without the constant pressure of their manipulations, without the fear of their invasions, without the guilt of their emotional blackmail, I began to rediscover who I was when I wasn't being the useful mother, the convenient mother-in-law, the free babysitter. Brenda became a true friend, not just the worried neighbor she had initially been. Together, we started a small support group for older women who had faced family abuse. Sharing our stories with others who had gone through similar situations confirmed that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't overreacted, and that my reactions had been completely justified. David finalized all the legal aspects of my new life: the modified will, the protected accounts, the permanent restraining orders. My estate would now serve to help other women escape abuse, not to perpetuate the cycle of greed that had destroyed my relationship with my son. A year after the arrest, I received a letter from prison. Marcus had been sentenced to 6 months for trespassing and attempted burglary. His letter was a strange mix of manipulation and genuine repentance, but I no longer cared to distinguish between the two. I had learned that some relationships are so poisoned that they cannot be saved, no matter how much love we've invested in them. "Mom," he wrote, "I know I made mistakes. When I get out, I want to try and fix things between us." I didn't answer the letter, not because I was cruel, but because I had finally understood that self-love sometimes requires closing doors that others insist on keeping open. Today, at 70 years old, I live in the same house I paid for with 40 years of work, but it is a completely different home. It's a place where I have control over who comes in and who goes out, where my decisions are respected, where my age is viewed as wisdom instead of vulnerability. I wake up every morning without anxiety about what family crisis I'll have to solve or what emotional manipulation I'll have to navigate. I use my money for things that bring me pleasure: books, plants for my garden, donations to causes I support, small luxuries I had denied myself for years, just to be able to send transfers to an account that never thanked me. Some nights, when I'm sitting in my quiet living room reading, I think about the boy Marcus was before greed corrupted him. I feel sadness for that loss, but I no longer feel guilt for setting boundaries that protected my dignity. I learned that real love never demands that you sacrifice your well-being for the comfort of others, that being a mother does not mean being a victim, and that the family that abuses you does not deserve unlimited access just for sharing blood. And I learned, most importantly of all, that it is never too late to stand up for yourself, no matter how many years you have spent normalizing abuse as love. My house now has new locks, secure bank accounts, and boundaries that no one can cross without my permission. But more important than that, my heart has healthy boundaries that protect the woman who worked 40 years to earn respect, not manipulation. Some battles are won not by destroying the enemy, but by refusing to remain a victim. This was mine. Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one, with love.